Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Luke.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Just a couple of days here before Christmas. Hard to believe we're coming to the end of 2024.
It's crazy. I
already.
Can't believe it.
So what do you have planned over the holidays?
I'm honestly just doing a lot of family time, spending a lot of time with the extended part of the family as well, which I really look forward to. And
Nice.
I always love Christmas morning at my family home with
Nice.
a nice breakfast and mimosas, and it'll just be great.
Good.
So, how about you?
We're hosting my family on Christmas. We were just in Barrie this past weekend, and we were with my in-laws. They live in Barrie, and my brother-in-law lives there. We were supposed to get together with their side, but unfortunately their daughter came down with the flu.
Aw.
So we already had plans to go back next weekend up to Barrie, so to see a bunch of my wife's friends. So we're going to do that, and we've rescheduled the family gathering for, I think, next Sunday.
Sweet.
So provided that everybody is healthy. So
Fingers crossed.
yes. So other than that, just some quiet time, some time to recharge. I think the last year has been very busy, and it'll just be nice to, just chill a little bit.
And it's been an interesting year too.
It has. And that being said, so in today's video, I thought it would be great for us to touch on a few things. We'll talk about some of the key trends in the local market over the last year.
Yep.
Real estate's definitely been in the news several times over the last year as well. So we'll talk about some of the key news stories. We'll talk about some of the things that you and I have personally experienced as we've been out there navigating this crazy market over the last year. And then we'll talk about where we're thinking things are going to possibly go in the year ahead. So
Sounds great.
That being said, let's get right into it. What are some of the key trends that have been noteworthy in our local area?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot. So speaking from a data standpoint, data that we've received from our local real estate board, these stats do not include the month of December just because we don't have those total figures yet. But from an average sale price standpoint, the highest average sale price was in June of 2024, and that was at $935,000, give or take.
And that's for the Greater Hamilton-Burlington area.
Correct,
Yeah.
exactly. And then the lowest being January, and that was around $835,000. So it's interesting that the highest and lowest, it was pretty much an 100K spread around that time. I think specifically for January, obviously, that's still the effects of the seasonal market taking place, so why things are slow. And then also because inflation was still quite high around that time as well. But all in all, spring, we saw the highest amount of activity. So April was leading in sales, and May, we had the highest amount of new listings around that time.
And maybe we started to see that increase in pricing because the overnight rate with the Bank of Canada started to come down this year. So that started to put some upward pressure on overall pricing.
For sure. Yeah, it was a huge conversation this year in terms of inflation and bringing the rates down.
Right.
Absolutely.
On average, homes were selling quickest in May, around 22 days or so. But usually we saw month to month things were sitting around just over a month to sell, like between 30 and 40 days on average.
Yeah, closer to 40 when we were in the seasonal market. So in the winter months, closer to 40. We're around that mark right now, I believe.
Homes were selling on average for between 97 and 98% of their list price. So we're in kind of that market where generally, not in every case, but a home will be listed at a certain number. A buyer's probably going to come in a little bit lower, and there's some negotiating going back and forth.
For sure. Negotiating was still taking place. However, sellers were still able to receive top dollar for their homes. I mean, 97 to 98% is still quite high in my opinion.
Yeah.
And buyers were still able to have they were able to have room in terms of negotiating, which is great.
Yeah. And then in terms of months of inventory, which is a key data point that indicates what kind of market we're in, if we're in a buyer's balanced or seller's market. Generally, it was throughout the year between 2 and 4.
So more balanced.
More of a balanced market, which I think you and I definitely felt that throughout the year. It felt balanced.
Definitely. I feel like we were working with obviously both buyers and sellers, and there were high points with sellers, low points with sellers, high points with buyers, and low points with buyers as well. Like, it just entirely depends, but usually we are able to find middle ground in most cases.
Yeah. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit here, the real estate market was definitely front and center several times throughout 2024.
Absolutely.
Within the media. So what are some of the key stories that Canadians have tuned into related to real estate, and maybe some local stories in the Hamilton-Burlington area?
For sure. I mean, I think the biggest story, and I think you would agree, definitely Bank of Canada.
Bank of Canada, interest rates.
Inflation as well. So Bank of Canada, we started with the interest rate at the beginning of the year at 5%. And just recently in December, we had our last Bank of Canada announcement, and they've reduced to 3.25%. So throughout the year, it stayed kind of steady at the beginning, and then Bank of Canada slowly started to introduce these interest rate cuts, which I think definitely helped with buyer confidence and seller confidence as well. There was a constant conversation about when is the right time to enter the market. With sellers, when do I list the property, and buyers, when do I buy? When do I start looking? So I think these cuts have been a very good thing. I think we're still going to see the impacts of affordability in 2025. And then in terms of inflation, Bank of Canada, their target was to hit around 2%. And right now we are closer to that target, which is great. 1.6% was where we were in September, and we started the year at 2.9%. So there has been a lot of changes, and I think the interest rate cuts have affected that a great deal. So aside from the Bank of Canada interest rate announcements and inflation, what are some of the key stories that you have experienced or saw? Yeah,
there's been a ton of discussion around the housing crisis in this country. All municipalities, I think, have been trying to deal with the crisis, the homelessness crisis, that sort of thing. Speaking specifically about housing affordability, there's been a few policy changes to help with, as an example, first-time buyers being able to get in the market, adding greater flexibility in terms of how much money you need to put down towards a purchase, most notably up to $1.5 million. And that sort of thing, just aimed around making it easier for people to get into the market.
Absolutely. And another key story I want to highlight as well is the historic slowdown we've seen with condominium sales specifically. I mean, here in our board and what we're experiencing in Hamilton and Burlington, I think you would agree the condo market was pretty soft throughout 2024, specifically with apartment style condos.
Some of the townhomes will still move pretty easily depending on the complex. But
Absolutely.
Yes, apartment style has been tough over the last year.
Yeah, things are sitting for a bit longer, for much longer than, the average data stats that we're receiving as well. And then more notably in Toronto as well, it's been a true historic slowdown. It is decreased by, the condominium sales in Toronto have decreased by 57% since 2023. So that is the slowest pace we've seen in 27 years, which is pretty significant, I would say.
Definitely. The freehold market has certainly been a lot more active than the condo market.
Absolutely. So what have you personally experienced with navigating this market in 2024? What specifically with your clients over the last year? What have you done? What have you seen?
Well, the last year has been interesting with our clients. I've handled a variety of life situations for people. I've dealt with a number of people that have upsized in the market that we're in. Lots of people that have downsized. I've had a change in life situation, as an example. Some of the older demographics sell their longtime family home, or maybe they're downsize their home and move into assisted living of some sort. I've handled a number of estate sales over the last year and helping families walk through that process, or executors of the estate walk through that process. Relocations, first-time buyers, there's really been a big mix of clients. What about you with your clients?
Yeah, something similar. I've worked with a lot of first-time home buyers this past year, and I mean, that's just so rewarding in itself, especially in a market that we've just dealt with so much ambiguity, and there's, that constant looming question mark about when the right time to move is. And I think I was just speaking with my first-time home buyer saying, now is the time, because, moving ahead into 2025, I think we could definitely experience a bit of a surge in the market, especially after these Bank of Canada announcements in the interest rate cuts. I mean, who's to say exactly what happens? We don't have a crystal ball. I wish we did.
I wish.
It would be so helpful. Great. Make my life a lot easier, but unfortunately not. But I mean, I don't think we're going to experience a surge in the market like anything we saw in February of 2022 by any means. But I do think for a lot of first-time home buyers, specifically once we hit that spring market in 2025, I think people will experience being priced out of the market, because as interest rates come down, historically prices will go up. It contains to be relative.
That could happen. Interestingly, over the last year, I haven't had anybody sell and move out of the country. Like I handled...
Right. You had a lot of that in previous years.
In 2022 and 2023, I had a few circumstances where people sold and moved out of Canada altogether. So it was nice to see that. I think a lot of that was frustration based. There was some retirement associated with that as well.
For sure.
But didn't have any of those situations happen over the last year. And despite all of the discussion around affordability, lots of people when they say hi to me or we just chat or I'm catching up with somebody, it's like, how's the market? And a lot of people will say, you know, there must be a lot of people that can't afford to be in their homes. A lot of people trying to unload. I didn't personally see that over the last year with our clients, at least. I can't speak for other homes that were listed. I maybe had one circumstance over the last year where one of our clients was in a bit of a financial
and had to make a change.
And that wasn't just because of unaffordability, that was because of some personal reasons why that person needed to move.
Exactly.
But I find that most of my clients, it was a lot of like upsizing over the last year, actually.
Yeah, upsizing for you, for me, first-time home buyers, and a lot of downsizing as well, which is, I mean, it was great.
Yeah.
The one thing too that I think we experienced as a team was it would be incredibly active for 3 weeks, and then things would turn on a dime, and then we experienced no activity. We weren't getting the calls on our listings, and I don't know, what do you think that means? Like, do you have a read on what that is exactly?
I think that there were various factors that were at play in those unique situations. What I can say is it was difficult to navigate some of those situations because, like you mentioned, it would be extremely active in terms of overall momentum. We were getting lots of showings on our listings, lots of showings booked, multiple offers on certain properties. And I would have somebody that would buy in that kind of market and then take a little bit too long to get their house ready to go on the market. And then by the time a couple of weeks down the line, when they turned around and got their house ready to go on the market, the market had completely changed.
Totally.
So we had to make certain adjustments in those circumstances. So that was a very strange thing about the last market. I would say just how quick it could change on a dime like that.
I also think, you know, specifically when things went a bit quiet for us too, was also when things were gearing up with the looming election in the States as well, in the presidential election. So things were a bit quiet, but then they were busy and then they were quiet again. So I think maybe that had something to do with it, but you know, it's such a guessing game. It's a what if, you know, you could go in circles. But
so I think that's going to be an interesting thing moving into the next year because as everybody knows, Canadian federal politics is just wild right now, and we're going to be having some sort of federal election.
Absolutely.
You know, whether it's at the beginning of the year or at the end of the year, I think it's going to be sooner rather than it is later. Based on what's happening right now. Usually when there's a federal election, it does cause a bit of a slowdown in the market. So that could be an interesting opportunity for some buyers that are looking that don't necessarily care about that.
Absolutely.
Where things maybe go a little bit more quiet and you've got some sellers that really do need to move their properties, and maybe some of these buyers can take advantage of that. And maybe some of our sellers can try to stay plugged in and maybe try to, if they can strategically hold off until maybe
and time it if it makes sense
the right way
to them. And again, it goes back to the question of when is the right time. Again, if it doesn't matter to certain people, if they're not plugged in that sense, then it could be the right time as long as you're prepared and as long as the right opportunity, so the right property comes along. For instance, it has to make sense for you. So sometimes you also have to shut out the noise. And ultimately just be prepared. Talk to the right people. You know, be in conversation with your realtor. Have a financial advisor or a mortgage broker that you are constantly engaging with. Understand what your buying power is so that you are able to move forward if the opportunity does present itself.
Another thing I wanted to highlight is, as we said earlier, the average list to sale price ratio. Homes were selling on average between 97 and 98% usually throughout the course of the year. It wasn't really the year of multiple offers. However, multiple offers were still happening, but I found that they were happening in areas where the demand is high and the inventory is typically low. And if there's specifically something really special about the property, we had a couple of listings of ours ours where that happened. As an example, we had a property, downtown Dundas that was a newer build that was listed in the higher price point. It was listed for 1.8, and we ended up having multiple offers on that. Your listing that you had on Sydenham in Dundas, we
also
had
a rare offering.
rare
that
offering,
also was
cottage style.
And then also nestled in this amazing lot surrounded by forest and a creek running through it. It was definitely for the right buyer, but they priced it well. They prepared their home really well. They staged it. It was gorgeous. And, we marketed the property really well. And we have both found that as long as those three things are happening, the home will sell eventually, which is great. And we're still seeing that.
Yeah, exactly. And then in the fourth quarter, I had some clients bid on a property in Pleasant Valley.
Right.
With an incredible view out the back. It wasn't on a ravine, but it had this view over top of all the other homes looking off in the distance.
I love Pleasant Valley.
Me too. Yeah, 4 offers. 4 offers on the property. They were the winning bid. Generally like I said, not the year of multiple offers, but it can certainly happen out there.
Absolutely. Another thing I wanted to speak about too, I think, again, with the Bank of Canada, with inflation being the top stories of the year and overall affordability as well, when working with a lot of first-time home buyers too, we're wanting to include conditions that are representing the best interests of our clients. And I would find that, with a financing condition as well, I think with the things that were going on in the market and the conversations that were being had, I think a lot of times the situation of the client, it would trigger an appraisal on a home. And I think that's something that is going to become more commonplace. So I think being able to be prepared for when that moment happens and having the conversation of, okay, if it doesn't price the way we want it to, or if the appraisal comes back and it's lower than what we want, how do we move forward? Can you move forward? I think these are the conversations that need to be had prior to.
And also our clients allowing us to keep an open line of communication between us and their mortgage professional is
so useful.
Very useful, extremely important. And that becomes a bigger issue when the appraisals come in lower, especially if we have a client buy something without a financing condition. And so it's really important to get the green light from their mortgage rep in advance if they are going in without a financing condition, to ensure that they'll be covered even if an appraisal comes in lower. At least they know what can happen if an appraisal comes in lower. But I found this year appraisals would come in lower and the appraisers were using comparable properties that were not at all comparable. It happened on one of our listings in Kirkendall. They were not using comparables at all. There weren't any great comparables to this property, so they were using ones that
from a long time ago.
They were using ones that, this particular property didn't back onto an apartment. They would bring a comparable that backed directly onto a high-rise apartment and then think that they were similar in value. And then we would try to provide some insight and they would refuse to reverse their decision on it. So it definitely put some, it was frustrating and it was unfair. It was unfair to the buyers and the seller of the property as well, actually. Just some people like to dig their heels in even when they are given additional information.
Absolutely.
A little bit unfortunate.
And again, it goes back to being prepared. So if these situations come up, are you in a position where you're able to move forward or not? So being educated, talking to the right people, I think that's what's important for sure.
So we've talked about it a little bit here as we've been going through this with stuff that we've seen over the last year, but where do you see things going in the year ahead in 2025? I think that's what a lot of people are very curious about. It's the big question mark. Again, it goes back to if we had that crystal ball,
totally.
It'd give us a serious competitive advantage, but given all the information that we know, where do you think things are going?
I mean, there have been conversations about home sales increasing around 10% for 2025. But the question is, when will this happen? Will it actually happen? That's the guesswork. I do anticipate a bit of a surge in 2025, probably around the spring market. I think things will be a bit slow in the seasonal months, January into February. I think January and February presents an awesome opportunity for first-time home buyers because, again, I think there is that fear of being priced out of the market come spring of 2025. So I would encourage those that have been on the sidelines waiting for the right time, If you're still hesitant, that's more than fine, but still have the conversations with people. As realtors, I'm sure I could speak for you on this. We don't care when you buy a home. We can work with you for a year, 2 years, whatever. We just want you to be happy, and it needs to happen at the right time.
Yeah.
And things have to align and make sense. But we want to equip you with information and knowledge along the way. So yeah, in terms of what will happen in 2025, who knows? But I do anticipate things hopefully being a bit more active than 2024, because we had that kind of mid-market plateau all the way from March to October. And I'm hoping for a bit more activity through, you know, the spring to summer months, I think. I think it'll be a bit more active.
Yep.
Yeah. What about you? What do you anticipate?
Yeah, I think that there's optimism around the market in the year ahead.
I think so.
And I think that with the overnight rate coming down several times throughout 2024, I do think that will likely lead to a busier market than we saw in 2024, and maybe a busier spring market. I don't think that we're going to see a flood of activity,
No.
but I do think it's going to be a little bit more active, maybe a little bit more stability right throughout the entire year.
Yep.
And maybe start to see that average price creep up just a little bit, but I don't think we're going to see that massive crazy multiple offer situation, average pricing going up by, you know, like 20% or anything like that. I think it's just, we're going to feel some stability and maybe just a crank up of overall activity.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So we'll see what happens in the year ahead.
It's exciting. I mean, we're ready.
We're ready. We are certainly ready. Merry Christmas to you
as
and your
well.
family, and Happy New Year. And let's see what happens in the year ahead.
Here's to 2025.
2025.